Hello YouTubers and welcome back to Go Figure Customs YouTube channel. Figured it's been a while since I put up some content, so I wanted to put together a video for today. And looking at some of the other YouTube creators that I like to follow, not necessarily on just customizing stuff, but one of the things that they seem to get the most response from and are most helpful with seem to be like top 10 lists. And my last video was a top 10 painting techniques video, and that went over pretty well. So kind of in that vein, I'm put together a list, not necessarily a top 10 list, but it's the top customizing tools that I can't live without. And I think there's probably not a lot on there that's going to be unusual, but actually, there are a couple of things that you wouldn't think that would be good customizing tools, but I've learned that I can't live without them. And they're in no particular order. And a few of them I do talk about in other videos. So, this is a little shameless self-promotion at the same time. So with that, let's get right into it. One of the first things that I can't live without is caffeine. Caffeine helps you do stupid things faster with more energy. And customizing buddies. Got to have good customizing buddies. Actually, probably one of the most important tools that I have is a good rotary tool. I use a Dremel model 4000. This is brand new. I've only had it a couple of months. I don't know how I got along without a Dremel. When I first started customizing, it was probably a year or two into customizing before I got a Dremel. And I hate to use the cliche game changer, but man, yeah, it really is. There are any number of brands of rotary tools. Dremel just seems to be the most popular one. I don't think it really matters what brand you get. The thing that I will say, would suggest that you stay away from is any one of the ones that have rechargeable batteries. I don't know if they've made improvements since the one that I had, but the batteries don't last very long. And then unless you have 2 or 3 of them, then you're waiting for the battery to recharge before you can use it again. That's what I started out with, was a rechargeable battery one, and it just got to the point where the battery was on the charger more than it was on the Dremel, and ended up talking my mom into getting me a Dremel for Christmas one year, and I used that until the beginning of this year, when it just finally fell apart from excessive use. And she got me this one for Christmas present this year, I guess. Maybe it was last year that fell apart. Anyway, a good rotary tool with a good accessory kit to go with it. There's all kinds of like cutting wheels and ball-shaped burrs that will put the holes that you need into the stuff, and sanding barrels, and just any number of cool, useful tools, attachments that will go on a rotary tool that really just make it an invaluable tool in your customizing arsenal. Figure display stands. Not because that's how I display my customs when I'm done, because clearly this is how I display my customs when I'm done, but to work on my customs, I put all of my customs on some sort of figure stand, so I don't have to hold the figure when I'm primering it, when I'm airbrushing it, when I'm hand painting it, when I'm gluing shit to it. And it makes a world of difference. That way you're not touching the paint, you're not touching the glue. And yeah, the best figure stands for like Marauder and G.I. Joe are the 25th anniversary Cobra figure stands. They have 2 pegs on them, and they're longer than the pegs that are on the G.I. Joe figure stand. So they fit your figures way better and make them a lot easier to use. That being said, there are some figures that will not go on those figure stands, and those specifically are Joy Toy. I believe this figure stand that I finally found fits their proprietary figures. I believe this is from the Halo figure line. So yeah, that's a Halo figure stand for Joy Toy figures. I just figured that one out today. I've been doing Joy Toy customs for a while now and have not had a decent figure stand because the one figure stand that they do come with is shit. A decent place to work. You want something that's well lit and something that's well ventilated. Otherwise, you've picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue. I use a carpet remnant on the floor underneath me. And one of the reasons that you see me wearing the same thing in like all of my videos, the same like 3 t-shirts and always the same pair of running pants, is because they're covered in paint and super glue. So I recommend having just like, it's like being in 2nd grade again. You need a smock to wear when you're hand painting, when you're finger painting. So having a good place to work and a carpet remnant underneath you so you don't ruin the carpet when you drop the paint and super glue, because you will, and clothes that you don't mind ruining. Those are absolutely useful. Make your wife a lot happier. Trust me on that. Tools that I can't live without. A good X-Acto knife. I like the number 11 blade. I have like 3 X-Acto knives sitting around at any one time, and you can buy blades in like a case of 100, and which I do recommend because I do go through a lot of X-Acto knife blades. Decent pair of like medical scissors, like iris scissors for cutting small things. Hemostats, which are medical clamps. I've got a pair right here. Oh no, those are my iris scissors. So a few pairs of hemostats. I use them for holding stuff when I primer. I use them for holding things when I glue. I use them for holding stuff when I paint. I have probably 10 or 20 pairs that I've picked up working as a medic over the last couple decades, and they're super useful. You can get them on real cheap on eBay. Toothpicks are another tool that I can't seem to live without. Again, useful for holding stuff when you're painting, primering, and gluing. Right now, I'm using a toothpick to primer, paint, and do a wash on this particular rifle that's going to go with that Punisher that I just showed you a second ago. The next big thing that I can't seem to live without is good sculpting material. My co-host and best friend JD lives and dies by green stuff. I've never used green stuff myself, but he swears by it and gets good results with it. Myself, I use, for a long time, I used Av's Epoxy Sculpt, and my buddy Sithfire 30, this is what he uses to do his sculpting, and he's one of the best sculptors out there, period. I use this stuff. I can't get the detail that I like with it because I'm suck at sculpting. So a lot of times what I'll use this for is to fill in gaps in weapons or seams in figures, or if the head, custom head that I get is, a lot of times they'll come almost hollow so that you can fill in the head to fit whatever ball joint you want to put it on. So I'll use this stuff for that as well. So less detailed work. For the more detailed work, I like Procreate. This stuff is fantastic. Takes detail real well. I think it's a little easier to use than Av's Epoxy Sculpt. And if you mix it differently, you can get different hardness results. flexibility. So a little less of one part and a little more of another, and the item will remain flexible after it's cured, which is fantastic. I did that on a few of my customs. The one that comes to mind is the coat straps on my Black Widow custom, my Jim Lee Black Widow custom. Tools for sculpting are also useful. You can get a decent pair of sculpting tools off of eBay pretty cheaply. For a long time I used dental picks, which also work fantastic. The next thing that is very useful is sandpaper. Sandpaper is what I use to sand joints before I primer and paint, so I don't get paint rubs. Plastics that are really smooth don't take primer or paint very well, so I'll use a super fine grit sandpaper, like 300 or 500, and sand it down a little bit before I primer and paint, so it will take the paint a lot better. And then I use sandpaper to kind of go over some of the sculpting material that I've used, because like I said, I suck at sculpting, so it comes out pretty rough. So I'll sand it down with some sandpaper when I get done, after it's cured, to kind of smooth out my results. Glue and accelerants. Super glue is something that I buy like almost in bulk because I use just an absolute shit ton of it. I don't have a particular brand that I'd recommend. I think whatever, although the brand I do use is Duro Super Glue, I'd recommend just whatever you find that works well for you. I've gone through 3 or 4 different brands of super glue. This is just the current one that I like to use right now because I know how it's going to react to stuff, how it's going to run, and how it's going to stick on stuff. So once you find a super glue that you know how it's going to work, that's the super glue that you probably should use. It's not the super glue so much as it is the accelerant. And you want to use accelerant, number one, because it accelerates the super glue. So your drying time is a couple of seconds. And that keeps your parts from falling apart while the glue is drying, which was a huge hassle for me when I first started doing this because I didn't use super glue accelerant. And the other big advantage of using super glue accelerant is that it will harden and strengthen the super glue that you do use, making it a lot more durable, which is an added bonus to that. Brand-wise, I use Instaset. Whatever hobby store that you get your paint from will probably have a brand there, and I've used a couple of different brands, and honestly, they're all really good. The stuff that I had been getting, Instaset used to come in a pump spray. This is in an aerosol spray, and I was really hesitant to switch. Once I find something that works, I hate to switch away from it, although the aerosol has worked pretty good. I bought this can a couple of years ago. It's empty. I'm going to go get a new can today. It's empty anyway. The next few things I've talked about ad nauseum in other videos, but it still doesn't change the fact that they're important to customizing. Number one is number whatever is using decent paint. That was part of the painting tutorial that I did in the last video. Using decent paint makes all the difference. Stay away from the cheaper and shittier paints. Definitely experiment and find out what paints work good for you. But you're going to spend some money on paint, but it'll be worth it. A paint stir is another tool that I can't live without. I use a lot of Tamiya paint, and it does not like to be shaken. It likes to be stirred, not unlike James Bond's martinis. And the Badger makes one. They're about 12 bucks, I think, 11 or 12 bucks. This is the third one I've bought in like 15, 16 years of customizing. So they do last a long time. And it takes a couple AA batteries. Highly recommend this. One of our guests on Go Figure on the General Geekery podcast put me on to using a wet palette, and I'll tell you what, that was a game changer as well. You can buy wet pellets or you can make your own with a sponge and some parchment paper, and thinning out your paints makes your paint work a lot better and look a lot better. It avoids that melted crayon syndrome where it looks like you've taken a crayon and a cigarette lighter and just dripped paint on there. You want to see the colors, you don't want to see the paint. And I know everybody's probably tired of me saying this, but airbrush and airbrush. This is definitely one of the things that I can't live without. I do tend to pump out my customs. I mean, I can customize a lot of figures really quick. And the reason that I can put them out so quickly is an airbrush. Normally it would take me a day or two to lay down base coats on a 3 3/4 inch figure, but I can do it in a couple minutes with an airbrush, and I get really good results with it. Plus there's all kinds of fancy techniques that you can do once you really get good with an airbrush, which I am just barely starting to get into. But it is totally worth it to get an airbrush, just if only to get base coats down on your figures. It definitely speeds up the time, your painting time, and it definitely gives you better results. Totally worth getting an airbrush. It does have a learning curve, but I'll tell you what, one of my coworkers started customizing Star Wars miniatures, and an airbrush was one of his first purchases. And stormtroopers are one of his favorite things to paint. And white historically is a bitch to use by hand painting, but using it, it's a simple thing when you're using an airbrush. And I know he is a much happier customizer since he has an airbrush and doesn't have to go through the headache of painting white by hand like a lot of us did when we first started. And then to start and to finish that kind of thing, and I've talked about it in ad nauseum in other videos, is primer and sealant. You want to primer all your stuff before you start painting it, because what is primer is something to help paint adhere to your figure. It's like working on a blank canvas then. And then sealant when you get done with it, especially if you're using an airbrush, because an airbrush does lay down really thin coats. Again, that's why I use figure stands, so I don't have to hold my figure, because it's super easy to get paint rubs when you're using an airbrush until you've sealed your custom. There's any number of primers out there, there's any number of sealants out there. Find out what works best for you and use that. Again, there's videos on this channel of which primers and sealants I like to use, and those are ones that I stick by. Other things that I've not historically stuck by but do now is brushes. I used to get just whatever brush the hobby store had, but in the last couple of years, Army Painters has come out with their own line of brushes, and man, I really like these. I'm not getting paid to say this by Army Painters. Wish I was. Hey, you want to sponsor the channel? That'd be sweet, guys. But man, they do put out a really nice line of brushes, and that's pretty much what I stick by now. Yeah, actually all my brushes that I use right now are Army Painter brushes, so definitely recommend those. The next thing on the list, which seems like a weird topic or a weird tool, is a hairdryer. I love my hairdryer. My wife got it for me. So to take apart figures, I used to do the boil and pop method. I had a microwave right here in my customizing area. I had a specific cup that I used, put water in it, heated it up for 3 minutes. But a hairdryer works so much quicker. It's so much more effective because of the speed. It heats up your item more thoroughly, more evenly. And the thing that you don't get with a hairdryer, the problem that you don't get with a hairdryer that you can run into with boiling or popping, is paint fades. So if you're trying to soften or paint runs, so if you're softening up figures to loosen joints so you don't break them, which I also recommend highly on newer, expensive figures with stuck joints. Don't force the joints, heat them up. One notable thing about that is the Iron Man 2 figures, those metallic paints. You boil and pop those, you will get paint runs off of that. The paint will just come right off of that figure by boiling and popping them, or by boiling them. So a hair dryer is fantastic. I also use a hair dryer to dry my washes a little quicker, or dry my paint if I'm in a hurry and want to get my paint dry a little quicker, or I've got the paint washed just perfect how I want it, and I don't want it to run, because it will run if you don't set it right. If it's not laying flat, the wash can run before it dries. I'll hit it with the hair dryer. One of the other things that I like the hair dryer for is it will soften up anything that's been cast or that's made out of resin. So like this particular vest that I have for the Punisher, it is a cast piece. Yes, it's cast in softer plastics, but by heating it up, it softens the resin and you can form fit it a little better. That works on just about any types of plastics, actually. A lot of the vests that I use from like Marauder and Joy Toy, I'll heat those up with the hair dryer, get them super, super soft, form fit them to my figure, and then go run them under cold water to get it to hold that temperature, or to hold that shape. So that's not something it's something you probably could do with boil and pop, but it is way more efficient to use a hair dryer for that. The next thing that I would recommend is a light box, and that's nothing more than a box that you shine light through, and you can get those off of Amazon for about $30. And one of the reasons like my friend Richard Whipple at Think Tank Customs and Dayton Allen at Sithfire 30, why their stuff looks fucking amazing when you see it on the internet? I mean, aside from the fact that it is fucking amazing stuff, is that they've taken a decent picture of it. And it's not, a couple of years ago, I would have recommended using a decent camera, because I have a professional level camera that I take my pictures with. But honestly, a cell phone these days will take an amazing picture. It's not about the quality of your camera, it's about the quality of the light you use. And using a light box will help you take decent pictures of your customs. Why spend all this time and effort to make a decent custom and post it on social media if you can't take a decent picture of it? Also, a caveat on that is get a copy of Photoshop. You can pirate Photoshop. I don't recommend that. I can't endorse that. But my understanding is you can get older copies of Photoshop for free on the internet. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with even just a free copy of Photoshop. You can add your own like logos, watermarks, especially if you're going to post on social media. Man, there's people out there that will be happy to take your picture and claim it as their item, and say that they did that. So you want to watermark your stuff, because man, people can be dicks. If you have Photoshop and a halfway decent printer, you can also make your own water slide decals, which is amazing and also a game changer, and also videos I have tutorials on this YouTube channel. Another thing that I would recommend is some sort of magnifying device. I don't talk about it much, but I am pretty much blind in my left eye. So I don't have a lot of depth perception, and my vision kind of sucks. And I'm getting up in age, a little long in the tooth. So magnifying glasses, these are just some cheater reading glasses that I got from Walgreens. But I'm looking at getting a like magnifying lamp. I've seen people use like jeweler's loops that are lit. Vega Customs, he has a pair of those and uses them and likes them. But I've seen people say that they have tried them and have not worked well for them because of the different magnification needed. But there, you can also get like magnifying lamps, which if you're gonna get one of those, and that's what I'm looking at getting, is make sure that it uses LED lights. I had one when I first started customizing, and it used a regular incandescent bulb, and I used it so much that the heat from the bulb softened up the mount that the lens was in, and the lens fell out and couldn't be put back in. So that all went in the garbage. So if you're gonna use a magnifying lens, magnifying lamp, make sure you use one that has LED lights, because LEDs don't get hot. And probably the last thing that I recommend having for customizing is patience. Nobody gets good at anything the first time out. Honestly, the only person that has to like your custom is you. But just take some time and learn some techniques. I've got tons of tutorials on here. There's just about every customizer I know will share their tips and tricks too, if you just ask nicely. So, take the time to learn some new tips and tricks, and take the patience to implement those and to get good at them. Especially if you're gonna use something like an airbrush, because there is a pretty steep learning curve on that, but the rewards for it are definitely worth it. It just takes some patience. And man, that's about it. That's all I got for the things that I can't live without as a customizer. Are there things that you can't live without as a customizer? Other suggestions that I might have missed? If there are, put them in the comments below. And as always, please do that fun social media stuff. Like, share, subscribe, comment below. And as always, thanks for watching.